what might be some of the ways if someone did have something traumatic, whether it was through how they were treated or even just a medical trauma, what are some ways that they might react when they're in the NICU that might be helpful for NICU professionals as they're treating both that baby and that family?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, do not be afraid to validate them. I think there's a difference in admitting that something may have been done wrong versus validating someone. So telling that mom, I'm so sorry. This is part of your story. You deserved better. Also, helping them understand you have options because when you're in it, it can feel like you feel powerless, like
Yeah.
helpless, right? And so I think helping them remember you have options. First of all, not all decisions have to be made right now in rounds. You don't have to answer us right now. If you want to take a few minutes or maybe even a couple of decisions don't even need a few minutes. You have a few hours. We might not need an answer for until tomorrow. I think this sentence, this isn't your fault, is so powerful.
Welcome to NICU Heroes, a podcast produced exclusively for NICU professionals, with me, Kathryn Whitaker, as your host. I'm the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit dedicated to providing free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a baby's NICU stay. As a NICU professional, you've been well trained to care for the tiniest and the sickest babies every day. While a NICU parent's scars are not as visible, those parents are often as fragile as their babies, requiring patience, guidance, and encouragement to ensure that they are mentally, emotionally, and physically prepared to endure the pressure of a NICU stay. NICU Heroes is dedicated to helping NICU professionals, like you, better understand, support, and nurture the entire NICU family. Howdy, y'all, and welcome back to another episode of NICU Heroes. I love having these conversations. Today's is no different. So HeHe Stewart was a guest over on our parent podcast, NICU Babies Parent Support. And I loved her conversation so much that I was like, I really felt like she would be a great perspective on the NICU Heroes podcast. So while she's a doula, and you may be saying, hey, that all happens before we see our patients, I felt like she had some great experience to give you an idea of how people were showing up to you in the NICU. Like, perhaps something was traumatic or really challenging in their birth. And we all know that when they walk into the NICU doors, they are carrying some baggage with them. And so to understand what they had so that you could unpack that with them, help them process that, but also show up for them, not just for their baby, but for them as the family. I felt like all those things kind of work together. So I'm so excited for this conversation. We talk a lot about advocacy, what trauma looks like, and how you can help patients advocate for themselves as well, how you can help advocate for them as well in receiving that advocacy. We have a really wonderful conversation. I know that you're going to love it. My guest today is HeHe Stewart. She's a leading childbirth educator, advocate, and maternity care reform expert. With a master's in human development and over a decade of experience, she empowers families with evidence-based birth prep, informed decision-making, and postpartum readiness. She's a fierce advocate, you'll hear that, for informed consent, reducing unnecessary interventions, and ensuring patient autonomy in birth. Beyond working with families, though, HeHe is actively involved in legislative efforts to improve women's health policies and to expand access to midwifery care. She works to reform maternity care by advocating for patient rights, increasing birth options, and improved maternal health outcomes. She's also the host of the Birth Lounge podcast. She interviews experts in pregnancy, women's health, and newborn development, giving parents the knowledge that they need to navigate both birth and postpartum with a lot of confidence. Her work continues to drive meaningful change through education, advocacy, and policy reform. She's a gem, y'all. You're going to love her. So let's get to a really great conversation. Well, HeHe, welcome back to the podcast. I say welcome back. You haven't been on NICU Heroes yet, but you are now. So welcome back to the Hand to Hold podcast family, I should say.
Thank you so much. It is such a joy to be back.
No, I'm happy you're here. Well, big development. If people listen to your podcast episode over on NICU babies parent support, they know that you had a baby. Okay, so we got to talk about this. So give me an idea of how having a baby has changed how you serve the people that you love through birth.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I think I probably shared about it on the episode that I was on pre having a baby, but I was really nervous that it was going to change like me and how I showed up in a negative way. I thought that I would not be able to bring as much unbiasedness to my work, and it actually worked the opposite. Now I am like hell bent on being unbiased because I received such neutral care during my birth. My midwives and I disagreed in certain places, and they ultimately were like, look, this is your birth. We've shared our opinions and our clinical recommendation, but it's up to you and your husband to make the decision. And when we disagreed and we chose to do something different than what they were recommending, they were like, "Yeah, we support you. Like, absolutely. Do what you feel best. Like, we're not going to let you make a dangerous decision, and we
Right.
trust you to make that decision for you." I shared over on my podcast, the Birth Launch podcast, I had shared my birth story. I pushed for a number of hours, which is something that I was not expecting. And my doulas, they never once, and I never expected them to shame me, but they never once have said anything other than like, "Hee that's birth. That like sometimes happens." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm hee like people were looking to me to like do it a certain way, and I like had all this mental anguish that people were going to judge me, and they ultimately were like, the people who judge you are not your people. Like you don't create a community of judgment, and you bring nothing but judge lessness to your community. So if someone is in your community judging you, maybe they're not in the right community." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I find so much comfort and just like validation in that." It was just great. So it has changed me, and I am just so much more committed, even more than ever, to show up unbiased and to genuinely trust the woman that's in front of me because I really do believe that she knows herself and her body the best. And I've also shared lightly on my Instagram that 3 days postpartum, we were checked into the hospital for a congenital complication that happened with my son. Nothing to do with home birth, nothing that could have been picked up prenatally, and nothing that could have been avoided. It just, what our care team or his care team calls just a stroke of bad luck. And that even made me feel deeper about trusting who is in front of you, because there were times in that journey where I didn't feel like the people around me were trusting me as his mom. And there were some care providers that really dismissed me along that journey. And had I not pushed, um, it's really possible that he might not be here with us because they were really overlooking some really crucial things, even though my instincts and my background knew that what I was seeing was not right. We had one doctor in the ER that was like, "I think I'm going to send you home." And I was like, "I think that my son is going to die if you do that." And it turns out he would have. So I show up even deeper now of like, we have to trust this woman, even if us as the professionals, we think like, "Oh, I really don't think you should do this." Or like, "I would never make this choice for myself or my child." At the end of the day, it's not you and it's not your child. And you have to trust that mom in front of you to make the decision, because you know, as well as I do, no mom sets out to make bad decisions for their children. Every mom wants what's best for their child. Your responsibility is to trust them and to support them in making that decision.
I can't remember if I've shared this with you, but I've shared it on the podcast before. There was a moment that we had with our son in the NICU, and it was a big decision. Were we gonna watch and wait, or were we gonna go into surgery? And I remember the neonatologist looked at me and he said, "Mom, what do you think?"
Oh,
And it was really, I think we were ultimately led, I think, to the place that we needed to be. He ended up having surgery, but I was grateful that he took the time and he was very interested in like, "You're the mom, you carried this baby for a while. I would love to know what you think." So I felt like a big part of the team as opposed to just like the person that birthed the baby. I was like, I kind of feel like, next to the baby, like I'm the most important person here. And it was
Yeah.
nice to be validated like that. So I'm grateful that you said that. Well, I want to back up a little bit and give people an idea. So why did you go into doula and being a doula, particularly focusing on trauma informed care? Like, I think it's important for people to understand your why so that they kind of follow us along in our conversation.
Yeah. So my background starts actually with my master's degree in human development and family studies. And what I thought I would do was I thought I would work with families that had children with ASD, autism spectrum disorder. And I had done that for a number of years before moving up to the Boston area. And I had done it through the sector of early childhood education. Um, when I got to Boston, the universe and God or whoever your higher power is in your life has a really funny way of closing doors that aren't for you. And I tried for months to get my foot in the door in the autism realm here in Boston, and I could not even get as much of an email back. And so then I just went back to early childhood education. It's what I knew. I was really good at it. I was very comfortable there. And someone I worked with said, "You would be a great doula." And I was like, "What's a doula?" And she said, "Oh, you help advocate for people who are having babies. You're basically like a birth coach." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't really want to go back to nursing school." And she was like, "No, it's not. You're not a nurse. You work in conjunction with nurses, midwives, OBs. Like you work alongside them. You're part of the team, but you're not medical." And I was like, "Oh, okay." It was a weekend course. I took the course and I realized like, all right, this is my calling. But deeper than that, I think there's so much that's missing from the doula world because, it is just a weekend course. Of course, that was 12 years ago, 11 years ago. Now there are longer courses, but I still find that there is a lot missing. And so when I first began to be a doula, my focus was preventing trauma in terms of like, let me teach you how to like make good decisions in your birth. And that's kind of how I phrase it. Like, I'm going to help you make good decisions. The longer I got into it, I realized there are not good and bad decisions. Let me teach you how to advocate for your goals in a system that unfortunately in this time is not set up to necessarily support women. And, if you're a nurse out there and that just made you feel like a little defensive and you're like, what? I definitely support nurses. I think you do as a nurse, right? I think you as a nurse, you as an OBGYN, you as a midwife do support moms and what they want. And I think you walk into the system every day wanting best for your clients and your patients. But if you really stop to think about it, I think we can all agree that the system as a whole, I mean, it doesn't support moms, but it also doesn't support you. It doesn't support you as a
Yeah.
nurse or a midwife or an OBGYN. And it's really unfortunate. And I think there's so many of us that want the system to be different. And so we show up different, but the system as a whole is really hard to navigate. And so that's what I do now. I teach people how to navigate the system, how to advocate for themselves, how to seek out care providers like the people in this audience, and to say, like, actually, this doctor is not respecting my wishes. So I'm going to change care to somebody who is going to listen to me, who is going to turn to me and say, what do you want? What do you feel? What is your, desire for the outcome of your birth? What do you think is best for your baby? Because unfortunately, not all care providers are there in their journey with care right now.
And it's notably, I mean, I think one of the biggest days of your life when you give
Oh
birth
my
to a
God.
child. And so it's an important milestone. And while those NICU professionals may have multiple babies that come through, they may not remember every single baby, but every single mom remembers the day that her baby was born, whether it was a positive experience or a really difficult experience. So I think remembering, I had a nurse tell me one time, you're caring for people's hopes and dreams. And so I think that was a good perspective to have on how we care for babies and how we show up for them and their families. So you mentioned something, HeHe, that I think is important. So you talked about good decisions, bad decisions. So sometimes a NICU birth can be difficult, but it may not be traumatic. And then
Yep.
some births are difficult and traumatic. So let's talk about the difference between difficult birth and a traumatic birth.
Well, I'm a really great example of that. I had a really um I don't like to use the word difficult for my own birth because it wasn't difficult, but it was intense and it was challenging. So I had a 3-day labor. I got to 10 centimeters really easy. I had just convinced myself I wasn't in labor. And by the time I knew it, I was 10 centimeters. And I was like, wow, we got to get this midwife here. I think this baby is coming. That was after 2 days of contracting and 2 days and one night. We woke up on, well, actually, I guess 2 days and two nights. Day one, night one, day two, night two. We woke up on night three, and I was like, all right, we got to get the midwife here, call the team. And I did not have a baby for another 16, 18 hours. I mean, and I had called the team thinking we're about to have a baby in the next few hours. The whole team came and was like, oh my God, we're about to have a baby. And then it just kept going and it kept going and it kept going. And it was challenging for everybody. I pushed my midwives to really sit in the discomfort of like how long my labor was. I pushed my husband to sit in the discomfort of like, okay, our midwifery team is starting to talk about transfer and he is like not having it. She will not even hear of it. And I knew my baby and I were safe. I pushed my doula and my photographer to be with us for 3 days. I mean, it was long and treacherous, and I pushed for many hours, and I have zero birth trauma, none. And it is because of the way I was treated, right? It is because when I would reach a point of saying, like, I can't do this, everybody around me were saying, you're already doing it. Like, it's not can you or can't you, you're doing it. If you've decided that you want something different, we can talk about your options. And I would say, no, I don't want something different. I want to have this baby at my house. And they would say, okay, then you're doing it and you're safe to keep going, right? Um, and I think that on the opposite end of that spectrum, you can have the difficult and the traumatic, and that one kind of makes sense to everybody. If it's hard and it's traumatic, that makes sense. But what about the births that aren't hard and it's not challenging? And it still turned out really traumatic, right? Maybe you were 0 to 10 centimeters in a really reasonable time. Let's call it 18 hours. So you worked, but you didn't have to work an extraordinary amount of time and you coped really well. And you showed up to the hospital at, let's call it 8.5 centimeters. You easily transitioned into an L&D room. You pushed for maybe 45 minutes. But the entire time that you were at the hospital staff was saying, it's so negligent that you labored at home so long. How could you have thought that this was safe? Oh my gosh, you need to slow down and you're pushing. Your baby's coming out way too fast. You're doing too much. You can't push like that. You have to get on your back. And the whole time you're saying, no, but I feel comfortable here. I feel good on my hands and knees. You cannot do that. This is dangerous for you and your baby. Like, and you're saying, well, I'm a low risk person. I'm unmedicated. I only want intermittent fetal monitoring. And they're saying, absolutely not. Your baby could die. I mean, just think about how traumatic it is to constantly have that pushback in a scenario where you were totally safe and your baby was totally safe and you were making completely evidence-based decisions. They were reasonable. They were safe. You had no reason to believe you needed continuous monitoring. You had no reason to change out of hands and knees into that lithotomy position. Your birth itself, pretty easy. Your body did exactly what it was supposed to do. For the months leading up to your birth, you had prepared for that exact situation, that exact birth, except the people around you caused your trauma. And I think for a lot of people, that is where they live. I think a lot of times it is actually us birth attendants that cause the trauma and not the birth itself. Now, of course, you have traumatic birth experiences, right? You have the experiences where you hemorrhage, very scary. Your baby had 3 nuchal cords and it required swift action, very scary. A very long shoulder dystocia that was not easily resolved, very scary. Things like that, right? Your baby just wouldn't tolerate labor and you didn't otherwise have any augmentation, very scary. Those things, normal, organic, natural trauma. But the trauma that's inflicted on you, in my opinion, is the hardest, not only to cope with, but also to move through, because you're stuck with the question of, why did the people that I trusted to take care of me do this to me? And that's a lot harder to reconcile than, all right, shoulder dystocia happens in X amount of births, and I just happen to be part of that 3 to 5%. Like, that is just kind of the cards that I drew this time. Or, okay, postpartum hemorrhage happens in a lot of cases, and I had an epidural and I had Pitocin, so the cards were stacked against me. That just happened to be the way the cookie crumbles for me. Except when it's done by the people around you and your body didn't fail you, not that your body fails you in those other situations, but your body wasn't part of it. Your birth, the way it transpired, wasn't part of it, but it was inflicted on you by the people that cared for you. That is really hard, and it sticks with you. And I think it makes you really question yourself as a mom. And I think that's the lasting impact that a lot of medical professionals really fail to realize, is that, when we traumatize women in birth, it's deeper than just like, oh, that was a very traumatic day. It makes them traumatized to make decisions for their baby, to find confidence in themselves as a mother, to find the motivation to push through other hard moments. Like if their breastfeeding journey is really hard, or their perineal healing is a little bit delayed and is really hard and painful, you have now set them behind the 8 ball. So not only does it feel hard, but it feels extra hard because they have the weight of this trauma that's also being carried with them.
Well, and as we think about what that looks like in the NICU, I'm grateful that you mentioned that trauma doesn't always look like what we think it looks like. So when
Mhm.
someone walks into the neonatal intensive care unit, their baby, obviously something medically is going on, and that is traumatic in and of itself, because it's not what you thought you were going to have. And then you start to doubt, because I would offer that most NICU moms feel guilt in some ways. Either they feel like their body failed them, even though we know that that is rarely the case, but that's how we feel, right? Because we're the ones who birthed them. And then in addition to that, you have difficult medical things that you're facing, decisions that you have to make that you maybe weren't prepared for. And so when people don't recognize how you're showing up and walking in that door and what you carry with you, sometimes your reactions are interpreted one way when really they could have been interpreted another way. So I'm grateful that you said that. So let's talk about how what might be some of the ways if someone did have something traumatic, whether it was through how they were treated or even just a medical trauma, what are some ways that they might react when they're in the NICU that might be helpful for NICU professionals as they're treating both that baby and that family?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, do not be afraid to validate them. I'm not a medical professional, but I talk to a lot of you every single day. And I'm so honored that a lot of you consider me a safe space, and you'll share things with me that you may not feel comfortable sharing with other people. One of the things I consistently hear is, we are not supposed to apologize to patients because it may seem as if the hospital or the staff did something wrong. And I appreciate that. I can recognize that. What I will say is, I think there's a difference in admitting that something may have been done wrong versus validating someone. So telling that mom, I'm so sorry. This is part of your story. You deserved better. You deserve better. I wish this wasn't where you're at. I wish this wasn't your circumstances. I wish that you didn't have to be here. That means the world. And they are going to remember your face and probably your scrub color and probably the way you had your hair that day, and maybe even right down to the necklace that you were wearing, because you very well might be the first person that validates them in, like, this sucks. And it's okay to even say as much. Like, you could just squat down beside them and hold their hand and just say, like, listen, I'm so sorry. This is where you're at right now. This sucks. But I'm here with you for the next 12 hours. And I want you to know that I will get you anything that you need, from crackers to a team member that you haven't been able to see. I will track them down and make sure they see you before I go home tonight. And I just want you to know that this is really hard, but you're doing a super great job. And if you need anything, I'm literally right out there. And if you poke your head out and you don't see me, just smash that red button right there on that paddle, and I will be in just a few minutes. Like, you're not alone in this, right? I think that validation is so huge. Um, I think also helping them understand you have options, because when you're in it, it can feel like you feel powerless, like
Yeah.
helpless, right? And so I think helping them remember you have options. First of all, not all decisions have to be made right now in rounds. You don't have to answer us right now. If you want to take a few minutes, or maybe even a couple of decisions don't even need a few minutes. You have a few hours. We might not need an answer for until tomorrow. You know what? Maybe you're scheduled for surgery tomorrow and you have all night to think about whether this is the right decision for you. Maybe the OT is not even going to be in until Monday and it's Saturday. So you've got a couple of days to think about whether you'd like OT to come and round on you. Maybe lactation isn't going to be in until Friday and it's Tuesday. So you have all week to decide whether you want to continue to breastfeed or you want to transition to pumping, or maybe you have decided that you want to end your nursing journey and you want to talk about other options of feeding your baby. Not every decision has to be made right here, right now. Some of them
That's good.
are going to be timely, right? Some of
Sure.
them you won't have that luxury. But I think where you can help them take a little break of decision making, not only are you going to give them the freedom to kind of think, but you're going to help reset their nervous system. I remember being in the hospital with my son, and it was really overwhelming to make decisions right then when the hospital staff was staring at us, because there were a lot of times where I wanted to say things to my husband, but I didn't want the hospital staff to hear it. I wanted a private conversation between me and my child's father. I wanted the two parents, the two people that made this baby. I wanted us to be able to have a conversation. I did not have the wherewithal, but my husband often had the wherewithal to say, could we have a few minutes where just he and I are having a conversation, and we'll call you back. And you know what? Our hospital staff picked up on that. And then the conversation usually ended with, we know you guys probably want to have a few minutes. So why don't you take a few minutes and we'll be back in maybe 15 minutes. But if you guys need a little bit longer, we'll just stick our heads in and you guys can just let us know you're not quite ready. Perfect, right? And if you, as a NICU nurse, pick up on those patterns, right? If you have a mom who's constantly saying, I need a few minutes, start offering that to her. Let her know, like, hey, it's totally fine for you to take a few minutes. I've picked up on the pattern that you often want some time to think about it. I'm going to give you a few minutes. So stop asking her for an answer right then, right? If you notice that she's constantly, maybe they have other children at home, and so her partner is at home and she doesn't want to make decisions by herself. And so every time you go in to ask her something, she says, let me call my partner. Don't put her in that situation. Start to walk in and say, hey, we've got a couple decisions to make. Do you want to call your partner? Or even better, you come in 30 minutes prior and say, hey, so in 30 minutes, we're going to have a couple of things to talk about. Do you want to text your partner and see if they'll be available for a phone call in 30 minutes? And that way we can all kind of chit chat about what's going to be next. Perfect. Right now,
That's
you
good.
are resetting her nervous system. You're making her feel so seen. You're letting her know that she's safe. You're validating in her in the fact of like, you're not being too much. You're not being too extra. It feels like you are being a lot when you ask things of your hospital staff. Everybody knows you guys are understaffed. Everybody knows that you're worked to the bone. Everybody knows that you have more than one patient. And so even asking you, like, to go and get my water bottle refilled just feels so extra. So if you can take the extra step to make her feel like you're not being too much, this is my job. I love serving you. I think that is so validating. And then I think the final thing is picking up on their body language. So if you see that they're uncomfortable with a certain provider, don't be afraid to say, like, hey, how do you like your care team? How do you like Nurse Melissa? How do you like the cardiologist? How's the anesthesiologist working with you? Do you like your OT? How's Jan treating you? And give them a chance to be like, oh, we love the cardiologist. Oh, the anesthesiologist. I don't know. She's okay. Like, she's a nice person. Oh, well, tell me more about that. What is there something that she's done that you don't like? Yeah, she's not really like listening to me. I continue to tell her my concerns and she continues to just do what I feel is like her own agenda. Oh, okay, cool. We have other OTs on staff. Are you interested in seeing somebody else? You can help people feel safer in the care, and it has nothing to do with your coworkers. Sometimes personalities just aren't
Yeah.
a good match.
Those are really good. I think it was last season, Mia Malcolm was one of our guests, and she said one of the best things that we can do is to be curious. So if someone
Oh,
keeps showing up late, don't assume that they don't care. She said it could be a transportation issue. Maybe you need to get social work involved. So she said she always starts with whatever the thing is. They're being difficult or whatever. She's like, well, they're probably not being difficult. There's probably something behind that. So being curious is a good, I think, just in general in life to be curious with people, but certainly in an intensive care situation, being curious is good because sometimes we make assumptions about how much they care or love their babies, and that's not really the case. It's something else that's going on.
I think this sentence, "This isn't your fault," is so powerful. Um, oh, that's gonna make me emotional. I think being told that about my own son's stuff was so validating. Like, "This isn't your fault. You didn't do anything to cause this. You couldn't have done anything to avoid it," is just so powerful because you're right, we do blame ourselves often, and that guilt can be so loud. And I know even after I had so many medical professionals say, like, this isn't your fault, I still spent months when I was up breastfeeding. I was deep in research. I knew that there was something I did. I knew there was just something that I could have done to avoid this. The truth is, they were right. There's nothing I could have done to avoid what we went through, and there's nothing I did that caused it, but that's not what my brain was telling me in the first few weeks and months afterwards. And so I think reminding them, this is not your fault. It's just really crummy luck. And I'm sorry for that. Right. So that is a super powerful sentence, if especially in the moments where maybe they're really emotional and you don't exactly know what to say. I think just the sentence of this is not your fault could be super life changing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I I'll add this. We were standing at the bedside. Our son was super critical, and I remember looking at the NICU nurse, and I said, "Oh my gosh, thank goodness he's never going to remember this." And she grabbed my hand and she said, "But you will."
Ugh.
And it was really not now I'm the one that's tearing up. It was really nice, he to be seen in a really difficult place that it's a hard place to be. And so to have someone just and we often think that it has to be something big that they say or something big that they do, but it's often presence and sometimes little nuggets like that that I was like, thank you for validating that. Yes, I remember where I was standing. I remember who she was. She grabbed my hand, like all those things that you were saying. I remember her, and I will always remember her. My son is almost 17 years old. That's a long time to remember a moment. So it does make an impact. So I'm grateful that you mentioned that. Um, okay, so you talked initially about advocacy, which I think is really important because there are, I think, some myths when it comes to advocacy. There are some people that are like, people who are advocates are great. And then there's other people that will say, well, if you're advocating for that, you're just being pushy or you're not listening or whatever. So let's talk about how you can be an advocate and how you can receive what they're sharing. And like, let's talk about what that relationship can look like in a good, in a good, healthy circumstance.
Yeah, when you ask about being an advocate, are you talking about medical staff being an advocate or the parent?
For parents, so when parents are advocating for something for their child, when you're the NICU professional receiving that, how can you help them be good advocates for their babies? And how can you receive the information that they're sharing with you that they're like, hey, this is important to me?
Okay, so I'm going to start with how can you help them be a good advocate? I think the question that your doctor asked you, what do you think? That's empower them. What do they think? They probably have thoughts. Or They may be stuck in fight or flight and they haven't actually thought about what they think. They haven't actually even tapped into their intuition, their mom gut, their dad gut. They haven't stopped to think, well, what do I want for my baby? Give them that space. I also think that one of the most powerful things that our staff did for us when we were in the hospital was just give us time. They didn't rush us. So when we were just thinking, when I was just crying, the room was just silent. And that can feel uncomfortable, but it's more uncomfortable to rush that person. They are clearly processing something. They need that time to just realize where they are in time and space. So just sit quietly. There's no need to keep talking. This is not a time to educate. You can offer tissues if you want, but a lot of times I think they just need a minute to like gather themselves, right? I also think that you, as the nurse, you're spending a lot of time with that family. So you're going to get to know them. You're probably going to hear things that they may not feel comfortable bringing up with a physician or someone like anesthesiology. You should encourage them to say that. So when they say, I am just so scared, they're not going to wake up from anesthesia if we do this, you should say, why don't we talk to anesthesiology about this? I think having an anesthesiologist talk to you about this would help you feel so much better. They do this every day. And I understand how scary it is that your baby is so tiny, but they see tiny babies all the time. This is literally what they do. Would that be helpful? If you can be in that room when they're having that conversation, you can take a little play out of my playbook. And one of the questions that I love to ask to help facilitate, and I call it a bridge between patients and providers, is I would say something like, Kathryn, did you have a question about how tiny your baby is and the amount of anesthesia they're going to use? Kathryn, did you have questions about what type of anesthesia your baby is going to have? You're not saying like, oh, Kathryn, I know that you had this question, or hey, Dr. Jones, Kathryn had a question about this. You're not trying to speak for that person. You're simply opening up space. Hey, Kathryn, did you have a question about? And then you've opened up the space for them to say, no, I feel like it was answered, or, oh, yeah, I totally forgot because I'm living this life that I never thought I would be living right now. And
Yeah.
I'm so sleep deprived and I'm so emotionally drained. And I'm also just like, collecting traumas as we go every single minute of every single day. I'm just adding to my bag of traumas. So being that voice of, did you have a question about? Another way that you could phrase it, if that's not not for you, you could say, I know you had asked me about, did you want to ask Dr. Jones about that same thing? So that's another way that you could phrase it.
Good.
In terms of being an advocate, I think the final thing I'll tell you is you should assure parents that no question is dumb. Because a lot of times you're going to hear them say, I know this is silly, or like, this may be a stupid question. My husband does this a lot and he's in healthcare. And even that's to say, like, and I know a lot of nurses probably feel the same way, but even the people who are in healthcare, sometimes when you're on the receiving end, you can feel super silly asking questions. You can sometimes feel like, well, I should know this answer, but we don't always know that answer. And so if you think about someone who's not in healthcare or a doula not adjacent to healthcare, they definitely don't know the answer. And so they might preface it by saying, this may be really dumb, or like, this is a silly question. You should absolutely take the opportunity to say, oh, that's not dumb. Oh, no, that's a really great question. A really great question. I don't think that's silly at all. Oh my gosh, if I was in your shoes, I would be asking that same exact question. Go ahead and validate them that the questions they have are not only normal, but they're valid. They're true. Those are real questions. And I think you're a really good mom. I mean, you could even say that. I think you're a great mom for asking that question, right? The more
That's
that you
really good.
give them, that validation, the more you're going to build their confidence to ask questions, to bring things up to the physicians and to the specialty teams, right? And so I think that is how you can help parents be an advocate for their child. Now, in terms of receiving that, this can kind of be really hard because a lot of times it may feel as if they're challenging you. It may feel as if, like, well, I'm the nurse, I'm the professional, I'm the one that has the degree.
I've seen 5 babies with this same thing, over the last 5 days, right? Yeah.
Totally. I mean, I've been a nurse for 30 years. I can't even count I don't even have enough hands, toes, if we tripled them by 3 times to count how many times I've cared for babies with this same diagnosis. You have to understand this parent's first time doing it, right? And so I think remembering you may have a long history. So if you were to pull out your drawer in the filing cabinet, you have 310 files. But if you pull out their drawer, there's one folder. And so it's really helpful to remember, A, they've never seen their child like this. They have never had their nervous system tripped up like this. They have probably never had to think about these decisions ever in their life. And so for you, this is I know we say this all the time, but this is just a regular Tuesday in the office. For them, this is a pivot in their life. They will never be the same that they were walking into these doors as they are walking out. They are a different human, sometimes better, but sometimes worse. In my case, I was worse. I needed therapy after my child's experience in the hospital, and it was just the cards that we were dealt. It was just the hand that we were dealt. Didn't have anything to do with any particular one person, but you have to realize that who you received on the day that they were checked into the NICU is totally different than the person that they will be when they're discharged. And I think holding space for that is really, really important. The other thing I will say is, I think checking yourself in how your job has impacted you in terms of the way that you deliver information to families can be really helpful. A lot of times when you see this all the time, and it's a coping mechanism because in the NICU we see such horrible things. And I just want to recognize, like, you do see a lot of sadness and you do see a lot of sick babies, but your delivery matters. So if you find yourself being a little harsh in your delivery, maybe check yourself and say, like, okay, I'm going to work on really delivering things in a sensitive way. Even though myself, I feel desensitized to these things, these parents are not desensitized at all. It's actually the opposite. They are in such a heightened state of sensitivity that a sentence for me that feels regular may be something that causes trauma to them. It may be something that 17 years later, instead of remembering a nurse grabbing your hand and saying, oh, but mom, you're going to remember this, they instead remember you saying, you know what, I think a little formula might just be best. That could be detrimental, right? And there's a way to present things. Instead of saying that, you could say, like, your breastfeeding journey has been really challenging. Talk to me about the things that you're feeling when you breastfeed. Tell me about some of the thoughts. Do you have any thoughts in your head as you're breastfeeding? I mean, they may have a ton of thoughts and they may say, no, I totally dissociate. I don't think about anything. My brain goes numb. Okay. We have other options to feed your baby. Is that something that you'd like to talk about? They may say, like, yes, this is killing me. I don't enjoy breastfeeding my baby. Or they might say, absolutely not. This is the one thing that makes me feel connected to my baby because it's the only time of day that I get to hold them. Great. Then we should have never mentioned formula. And thank goodness that we didn't, right? Thank goodness we started the conversation with what's coming up with you, what's going through your head. Also, there are other options. Do you want to talk about those? I think your delivery is everything. I also think that remembering that asking questions is not challenging you. They're most likely trying to understand what's going on. They really are. They're really probably just trying to grasp. I mean, I'm healthcare adjacent. My husband is in healthcare. And there were still times where we both were like, we are just trying to understand
Yeah.
how we got from a beautiful home birth without any complications to here. A 5-day hospital stay, and our child was incredibly sick, right? Like, how did we get here? And so I think really, really recognizing within yourself, these questions are not meant to challenge me, and they're certainly not questioning whether I am qualified to do my job. They're just probably trying to understand what's going on with their child. I think that's really important too. And then the final thing I will say is ask them about their communication style. And I say this from lived
Right.
experience. Okay. I am someone who wants you to shoot me straight. I don't want you to give me false hope. I'm not trying to have you tell me, like, things are so good. Like, you're probably going to be discharged so soon, knowing in the back of your head, like, these people probably have a couple days of a stay, but I'm just going to give them a little hope. I would prefer that you come to me and say, listen, your baby is doing well, but I still think that you have a couple of days. So I just wanted to prepare you mentally that you're going to have a couple of a day. You're going to be here for a couple of days, okay? I just want you to kind of know what you're looking at in terms of your hospital stay. Some people are not going to appreciate that. Some people probably do want to know that discharge is coming, and they probably will find hope in knowing, like, all right, you guys are getting closer to discharge every day, like your baby's doing so good. You should ask them, what is your communication style? Do you like information to be, I mean, I would just start with, like, what's your communication style? Most people probably know it, but if they're like, I don't know, you can give them some options. Would you rather me just shoot you straight and tell you straight up, even if it is not maybe what you want to hear? Or do you want me to kind of give you a full picture overview and maybe not tell you the really, really hard things until we need to make that decision? How do you cope, right? How do you receive information? I think that's really important. And I recognize I can feel some of you rolling your eyes at me being like, hee, you're adding to my list of to-dos. Like, my mental load is already so much. And I'm so sorry. I really am. Um, this is going to make such a big difference though. I can't tell you how much of a big difference this is going to make. This is going to be a make it or break it in those parents receiving some of that trauma, because if you can just communicate to them in the way that they receive information, you will be saving them loads of trauma by miscommunication, right? If you can communicate to them in a way that feels good to them and is very clear, then all the trauma that comes from missed communications, where, like, well, I thought I explained it to them, but that's not
Yeah.
really what they heard. And now they're spiraling. And now you walked in and they're crying and they tell you what they're crying about. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's not at all what I said, or that's not at all what I meant. We can save all parties the heartache of missed communications and miscommunications. By just simply understanding how each patient communicates. And I think the rest of your team would really appreciate that, because if a physician walks in and they see a note on a whiteboard outside of that patient's room, or they scan that patient's chart and they see, like, patient appreciates very straightforward, direct conversation quoted, even if it's not what I want to hear, that doctor's going to walk in and be like, all right, I know exactly how to communicate with this patient, and I'm going to be able to prevent some trauma from them by miscommunicating with them. And so, yeah, I just think that's really important. I think understanding
Yeah.
how each family communicates and receives communication is one of the most important things you can do. And I think that that's kind of a new age idea. I don't think a lot of people walk into patient care rooms thinking about that, and it can really be pivotal.
And not only that, but it could even expedite the care of the baby, meaning that instead of worrying about the things that they're worried about with their baby, they've got the information that they need, then they can move forward with a decision and then you can get to the next thing, as opposed to, oh, there was missed communication. I didn't know that. And then I, maybe put up some roadblocks that weren't even necessary. Had we just had a different kind of conversation, we could have leapfrog, is that the right word? We could have just leapt past all that, a couple of days, and we could have been in a different place sooner because we communicated better. That's a life lesson for not just babies, but relationships too. But I mean, in this case, you're dealing with the outcomes of babies, and the goal, like you said, is not just to want the best for our babies, but to spend less time in the NICU and more time at home. Because while NICUs are amazing, they're not as amazing as a house
They
where
are
a baby
not as
grows and
amazing
thrives.
as the house. For sure. I mean, and, you know, you're dealing with people who their nervous system is on the fritz. And so if they haven't done
Right.
a lot of nervous system work, even if they have, they are in a state that, like, it's just really hard to function. I also think that miscommunication lends itself to mistrust. And so
Yes.
if you find that there was a miscommunication between you and that family, I do think repair is really important. And it doesn't have to be really in depth. It could just be as simple as, like, the next time that you're flushing the IV or the next time that you are checking that baby's temperature, you take just a 90-second piece of time before you leave that room to say, "Hey, Kathryn, I realized that I, as a nurse, miscommunicated with you earlier. I want to let you know that was so unintentional. I never meant to miscommunicate that. And I don't want that to impact the trust that you have in me. And I realize going forward, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to make sure that that doesn't happen. You've just restored all the trust. If they had lost any
Yeah.
trust in you, that will restore it in just 90 seconds. You just admitted or validated that there was a miscommunication. You took ownership in it, even if it's not your fault. Sometimes, us as the professionals, we just have to be the ones to say, like, that was my fault. I have been there a million times as a doula, like, I told this person that, I told this person that, I told this person that, and then in the debrief, I'm like, I should have done a better job of communicating that to you. And I'm very sorry for that. And then I think that follow up of, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to make sure that never happens again is really, really important.
Yeah. And it takes away more hardness in an
Oh,
already difficult and an already hard place. Like, it's I think we hear neonatal, but we forget about intensive care unit. This is a hard place to be. And we don't even know what happened before they got into the NICU, and we don't know what they're facing when they leave the NICU and some of the fears and concerns that they have post NICU. So there's a lot there in addition to, do they have other children at home? What is their home life like? Do they have a stable place to work, a stable place to live? Like, all those factors are sort of just bubbles to the top in the NICU, and it can be um, a really healing place or it can be a really traumatic place. And I think a lot of that depends on how we show up for our patients. I want to skip back a little bit to doula part, because I want you to share, because I would suspect that if I were to ask a NICU nurse listening or a NICU professional listening, that they've had a really, really good day. Like, they were like, man, this was one of my best days as a professional. So I want you to go back and I want you to think about your best day as a doula and what's a life lesson that you took from that best day.
oh my gosh. I mean, I think as a doula, I mean, I could say this as a mom too, I think. You'll never regret speaking up. Like, you'll never regret asking the questions and speaking up. I know I don't as a doula. And when I think about my best, so we call them saves on our team, our best saves. Um, like, we, stopped an unnecessary episiotomy by just simply asking, "Oh, what are you doing down there?" Or just simply asking, "Hey, Kathryn, your doctor looks like they have scissors and are getting ready to have an episiotomy. Are you okay with that?" I think as a NICU nurse, it's really okay to always ask questions. I mean, if you have, let's say you get in this awkward situation where you have an MD that is notorious for not getting consent for things, I think it's okay for you to say, "Have you checked in with the family to see if they're okay with this?" It's awkward for you for sure. And I'm not going to say it's not awkward. It's awkward for me to speak up against an OB in the birth room, right? And like it's so awkward. But that's your job. And you'll never regret that because at the end of the day, you're not beholden to that doctor. You're there to serve that patient as a patient advocate. You're there to serve that family and to make sure that they walk away with the best care possible. And I think being that buffer can be so amazing. If you're standing in a room and you feel like the care team is talking at these parents, and you can tell on these parents' face that they are just so overwhelmed with what's coming at them, I don't think you'll ever regret saying, "Do you guys need a minute? Are we throwing too much at you? Is this too much? Would you rather us have just one MD come in at a time so that you can have one conversation instead of the attending, the cardiologist, the anesthesiologist, and the nephrologist all at once?" That's a lot. It's a lot of conversations. That's a lot of decisions. That's a lot of reports. Would you rather us break it up for you? Some families are going to say, no, I want to go ahead and get it over with. Everybody all at once. I don't want to drag this on. But some people are going to say, like, yeah, I can't remember who said what to us about our child's care. And it's like, it's given me a ton of anxiety because now I don't remember what we're doing. I don't remember what the plan is, and I think one of the most helpful things is remembering you're never going to regret speaking up. And with that, you're not always going to do it right. There are times that as a doula and as a mom, I have spoken up and I didn't do it the right way. And I just sit with that and I reflect and say like, okay, that did not land like I thought it was going to land. I thought that would be received a little bit differently. It wasn't. How could I do it better next time? How can I speak up next time? So maybe as a NICU nurse, you get your butt chewed by an MD and you're like, all right, I didn't think that would be the outcome. How do I speak up next time that doesn't offend Dr. Jones, but also does advocate for my patient? And that may mean that you have to have an awkward conversation with Dr. Jones, and it may mean that you have to hold a firm line. And you guys know as well as I do, you can do that. You are strong enough to stand up to Dr. Jones and say, but that family was clearly uncomfortable. If we continue to talk at them, we were going to cause trauma for them. I'm not trying to step on your toes. I respect you, Dr. Jones. In the future, when I see one of my families is uncomfortable, do you have a preference of how I stop the room? Because we can't continue to just badger them with things. Like, we have to respect where they are. And I'm not sure that you always recognize that families are being overwhelmed. And I want to make sure that us as a team are serving our families to the best of our ability, right? Reason with Dr. Jones, have them talk to you about how they prefer you speak up. Maybe they don't want you to say that in front of them and they'd instead like for you to pretend that your pager just went off and you say, oh, Dr. Jones, there was a code 17 and that means, hey, we gotta stop. You like, look at this family. They're spiraling. They have completely dissociated. They're not retaining anything we're saying. The mom is just like a deer in the headlights. The dad has no idea what we're talking about. Code 17. That means we need to get out of the room. We need to give them a few minutes, and then we're going to come back in and talk to them maybe about just one thing or one or two decisions, right?
That's good. Now I'm going to ask you to go on the other side.
Yeah.
Most you knew it was coming. Your most challenging day, and what did you receive from that? Hee
Um, so my most challenging day as a doula, it came from speaking up too. And it looked a lot like what I just explained, but the Dr. Jones in that situation brought me out in the hallway and berated me and told me that if I ever spoke up for another client in his presence, he was going to blackball me and make sure that I didn't get into any of the surrounding area hospitals. And I just told him that wasn't true. Like, you're not going to be able to do that. I am well within my scope. I am sorry that that didn't land well with you. is there a way that you would have preferred me to ask that question? But I did ask it in the way of, are you okay with this? And essentially the mom was not okay with what was happening. And so when she spoke up and said, no, I want this to stop, he was really angry because he had his own agenda, right? And he ultimately told me, yeah, I want you to keep your mouth shut. And I said, that's not going to happen. I am here to advocate for my patients. And he was furious. Oh my gosh, he turned around, he stormed off, he yelled at me. It was really unsettling. I mean, it shook me up for a long time. I was really nervous to go into hospitals for months afterwards because I was scared that I was going to be treated like that by other obstetricians or other healthcare professionals. It made me scared of nurses even, and the nurses didn't even do anything. But that was part of it, is that the nurse didn't do anything. I know that she heard me being yelled at right outside of the room, and she had the opportunity to come to me and say, hey, I just want you to know Dr. Jones can have a temper. You didn't deserve that. And also, I think how you advocated for your client was the correct way. And if she didn't want to do that, because sometimes that can feel like you're stepping on Dr. Jones's toes, just that simple sentence of like, hey, I heard that, and I just want you to know you didn't deserve that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry he did that to you. That's okay. You can do that too. But I walked back in the room and she acted like nothing had happened. Now, my clients on the other end were like, what
Whoa,
just
whoa, what
happened?
just happened? Yeah.
Right? They wrote a letter to the hospital. So they defended me. They took care of me. I felt safe with them. But that nurse had an opportunity to say, like, I'm sorry, you didn't deserve that. That wasn't the right way to have that handled. And she didn't. So, it all comes from speaking up. And even still, going back to our first point, I still don't regret speaking up in that situation.
Yeah.
I still know that I protected that mom from a really aggressive cervical check. What was happening was she was having a cervical check and he was really hurting her, and she was screaming, ow, ow, ow. And I said, you can say stop if you'd like. And she was like, stop, get out. I don't want this anymore. And boy, that just, he didn't like it.
Yeah.
He did not appreciate that. So
I think probably the theme of the whole hour he has been about making people feel seen. We don't know how we're going to react to hard news. We don't know what it's going to be like, because for many people, while they may be repeat stayers in the NICU, for a lot of moms and families, it's their first time there. It may be the first time that they've ever had something difficult happen to any of their children, medically or otherwise. And so you're dealing with a lot of newness, but also uncertainty. And I think when you can make people like, hey, I see the fear, I see the trepidation, I see the concern, I see the advocacy, like all those things, I see you. And so let's work together to figure out how we can care for this baby the best so that we can get you out of here and get you home so that your baby can thrive. So I mean, it's what you do. Your life's work as a doula is to make people feel seen and advocated for. It makes sense that that would be the theme of what we talked about today. But HeHe, I love visiting with you. Thank you for just giving people good perspective. It's awesome.